under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Jennifer will not be with us tonight. I hope she's watching us live. First is the presentations, open space, wetlands, GIS analysis that Ray has done on behalf of the Board of Finance. Ray?
Well, Jeff asked me to come and present to you what I presented to Board of Finance. Back a month or so ago, John Michaels wrote to Jeff and asked him, next page, to have me go out and work with our GIS guys to identify the acreage of wetlands. All right, and we defined it specifically. There's many ways of talking about wetlands. The state has wetlands maps, quite a few of them. We define it as what our inland wetlands map looks like, and that is anything that's been surveyed and described as inland wetlands. Our GIS system has a layer of that. People have, whenever they get a survey done for wetlands, it's been marked, and that's what we use as the basis for this analysis. We wanted to identify how many acres that is, identify how many acres of that has already been included in the town's open space layer. We have another layer in GIS that's all the defined open space properties, and provide a spreadsheet and some data and maps to show the results. This map, and Betsy, can you blow that up a little bit? And I have a larger map if anybody wants to see it. The areas, let's see if I remember right. The areas in various colors, the purples and some of those others, are what we consider to be open space. Farms appear. The state property is not yet coded as open space, but a piece of that is in the analysis. The green are the wetlands areas. Those are areas that in the wetlands layer of GIS have been surveyed and mapped and coded as open space. The red, as wetlands. The red is areas that are both wetlands and open space. So this large open space parcel here, this red area has been marked as wetlands, and it overlaps on an open space layer. These green areas are just plain wetlands. They're not part of open space. In the Board of Finance, Dick Hill and John Riley have asked to do this analysis because they have a presumption that wetlands should be considered as part of our open space, and they're marching towards a goal of 25%, and they don't want to fund it if we're already at 25%. So their premise is that these green areas should be part of the open space. Next page, please, Bets. So the analysis, yeah, you can bring that down. The analysis showed that there are those red areas, there are 431 acres of the red. Those little green areas are 698 acres. That 698 represents 2% of 26,176 acres of town property, of overall property within the town. But as you look deeper into that 698 acres, 154 of them are between a half an acre or less than a half an acre, right, from 0 to 0.499 acres on 154 parcels. So that means that various residents that have parcels defined, right, up to a half an acre of their property has been coded as wetlands, and it's not part of an open space layer. And Mr. Hill's premise is that those should be considered to be open space. Right. The analysis, I drew it out. I went to up to a half an acre, from 5 acres to just under 1 acre, 1 acre to 5 acres, and greater than 5 acres. So a large percentage of these properties are less than 1 acre of wetlands on parcels that are today not considered open space. If you believe that premise that should be open space, that would be 2.7%. Can you just scroll down a little bit? So if you take our total, 698 acres of wetlands not open space, 431 are already considered to be open space, that equals 1,129 acres of wetlands. Right? You add that to open space that's not intersecting with wetlands at all, 4,800 acres. You add those two together and you come up with 5,239 potential open space, which would be about 20% of this number. During a conversation, John Michael says, well, that 26,176, that's not the same total acres of the town that I have, right? I said, well, that's the number that Dolores gave me, right? And Dolores has since gone down and said, in 1958, the plan of development said there was 40.6 square miles, or 25,984 acres. The 1983 plan said there was 39.8 square miles, or 25,472. I have about 8 or 9 different definitions of how many acres are in town, right? I think she's now going to start coordinating a round number of 40 square miles to be 25,600 acres. So if I looked at, if I used 25,600 here, this number would be up to 21%. That's today's open space. Dick's premise is that you should add that 2.7 to it, and you'd be up at 23, almost 23% of open space.
And you have more to it.
Yeah, just a few other things. Keep going. Just to look at that current open space, all right, which is at a 20%, that comes from a variety of definitions in our land records and GIS. Town open space and recreational parcels, parcels that are Southbury Land Trust dedicated open space, other people who have dedicated open space, and then conservation easements. State has open space, and then I added in this 805 acres of the training school property. That 805 acres is part of the total 1,294 acres that they've deeded to us as open space, and it just hasn't been coded yet as that. So with that 805 acres, and Dick was particularly concerned about the Stiles easement that happened in the last year or so, that was already in the open space number here. So that brings me down to 52. Of that open space, just of interest, this does not include 235 acres of golf courses, 18 acres of cemeteries, and 95 acres of what's listed in the open space records as wildlife and game preserve. There's a parcel in Heritage Village up off of East Hill Road, and that's sort of the title of it. It's been preserved as open space, but it's not permanent. It could change its properties. So Dolores does not include that in the open space number today. This all relates back to some numbers I just wanted to tie back for the Board of Finance. Back in 2015, John Michaels had done an analysis of our land acres. And, you know, his number at the time was 4,386 acres that he got from Dolores. That's the 17.1%. If you back up a slide, so I'm showing 52 up from that 43, and that's roughly 866 acre increase. It's the 805, the Stiles easement, and some other things that have happened in the last 2 years that John didn't have. So that was 17%. Dolores is now showing it, we're at 20%. If you just scroll down a little bit there, you'll see there's a number of 25,628. As Dolores said, 25,600 is going to be the standard that she's going to apply as our total acres when you do the calculation. So we're in the ball game. So that's really the results of the analysis. Go back a slide or two. That 2.7% or close to that is what we considered, is what was the object of the analysis. What wetlands are not considered open space that Dick and John Riley would promote should be considered open space. It's not the Board of Finance's job to figure out open space, right? It's really in the Planning Commission and the Board of Selectmen to agree on what the open space categories are. We gave this to the Board of Finance. They're actually looking for an answer from Jeff, I think, as well as our goal now are we now at 24% of the 25% or not? Right.
So what I'm saying here is that, number one, when the people of the town of Southbury supported the open space of 25% in town, what would the average person think an open space parcel would be? I honestly don't believe, in my mind, and this is the personal thing, in my mind, what I'm thinking about open space is not a half acre or a quarter of an acre of wetlands on a 2-acre building lot that happens to be wetlands. That's really not, I don't believe that's what people are considering when they supported the open space initiative to 25%. Whether it's a technical thing on the state side that they consider wetlands as an open space, that may or may not be true. It may be a law, but what is it that the people were looking for? And I don't believe it was the half acre of open space on a 3-acre building. I think they're looking for open space to be of substance. Maybe a large tract of wetlands that shows up as open space. Mike, you look like you're...
No, I agree. I mean, I wasn't, part of those discussions, back then. And frankly, I don't know even how the 25% was really decided on.
It's a goal.
It was a nice goal. I think, let's have a quarter of, land being open space, which is a nice sounding goal. I've said before, I think the percentage of 22, 23, 25 is relatively moot, and really isn't the right way to look at open space or quality of life, and strategic planning in a town. I think that it's a goal, and it should be a goal, but it's not, whether we get to that goal that's not it. It's about quality of life. And I would agree with you, Jeff. I think when the average person thinks of open space, they think of protecting open space so it can't be built on. So it will remain open, green, in its natural state. Helping to maintain some of the agricultural, history of our town, and balance smart development with some of our agricultural history. So I would agree with you on that. I don't think it's let's find every little piece of wetland that might be sitting behind residential property that couldn't be built on in the first place and say, oh, got to throw that in. So on that, I would agree. I think open space is meant to be, and I'd say this as someone who works for an environmental organization, most people think of open space and want open space to protect it from being built on. And that, when you think of open space, it's the town preserving property to keep it in its natural state that might otherwise be developed. So,
any other, Jason?
Have you looked at all the difference between, for assessment purposes, how we assess an open space parcel, maybe under PA 490, versus the impact to the assessment on wetlands? Because you have a 2-acre residential lot has a little wetlands, so there's going to be like a little factor in the assessment to decrease it a bit. I assume that decrease is going to be far less than what the decrease is on an open space parcel. Have we looked at those numbers at all? Because I think part of the question was early on, do we have enough open space? And then also there was like this fairness question as to assessments and how that's all working. And I was wondering if we looked at those numbers at all.
No,
that wasn't part of my analysis.
No, this analysis was just to see if there was anything major in the open space goal, just as far as that goes. The rest, it gets a little complicated with the assessor, and that's where that's handled.
I'm sure it does. I mean, I would say I agree with everything that's been said so far about how we should categorize open space, and like a little sliver of wetlands doesn't seem to make sense. And I think that would become even clearer when you look at the assessments, because if we as a town were going to say, we're now going to include in our open space percentage all of these little slivers of wetlands, but we're now assessing them very differently than we assess open space. And we don't have any mechanism by which we can assess them another way, because we're talking about little slivers of parcels. They just decrease values of lots by a little bit. So now you're taxing open space versus open space very differently. And I think the best way to get at this would be the next time we do the plan of conservation and development, I think that this should be on the front burner, that the definition be put in there so everyone knows what we're talking about. Going forward, either it includes these or it doesn't, and it doesn't seem to make sense that we would include all those little specks of green when we're looking at our goal.
Justin?
I would add that even if you look at the 1 to 4 acre pieces of wetlands, those are basically swamps. And I know where the Board of Finance is going with this, obviously. They'd like us to stop spending money on open space. And this is another way of saying, hey, we're already there. But I think Jason's absolutely right. I mean, this is really for the next POCD, this whole discussion. And if enough people find 25% to be arbitrary, we can put it back down to 20 where it always was. I just hope, personally, it's my opinion, that the town should always be ready to purchase one of the crown jewels if it comes available.
Regardless of
Something
whether it's
like-
over the top.
Something like Platt Park on Flood Bridge, regardless of where we are with percentages or whatever else, if there comes along something like that, I mean, that park's gorgeous, and there's others in town. What we preserved up on Lake Nona is gorgeous. I just think we should be ready for that, and that's my take.
I agree with everything that's been said. I think we're in unanimity. Is that a word on this? I hear what Jeff says about little pieces of land. I mean, I've got some on my street, open space designated land. I'm wondering why they're there. I mean, it's like a little tiny strip of land between 2 building lots. It's like, is that open space? Not in my view. I wouldn't consider that as open space. And I wonder, when was the last time we've actually purchased a chunk of land just because we wanted to get the open space percentage closer to 25%? I don't know if it's ever happened.
Well, George, I don't think because I sat on RUPAC, it's not a corporate goal to get this done. It's a goal.
That's what I'm saying. We buy land because what Justin is saying, it's a jewel and we want to preserve it. And that's the Stiles property is a good example of that.
And quite
that's
frankly,
when we do it.
Yeah, I mean, the old Housatonic Farm up on East Flat Hill and West Flat Hill, that was the original 750 acres that is now in agricultural production, state forest now. The state bought some, and it worked out quite well. I know it's easy to talk about, let me just say this, it's easy to talk about some properties that on Monday morning quarterbacking you could question, but in the plan of conservation and development and the long-range plan, it may not have done it at 100%, but I think it was at least at a 95% rating this town has accomplished. And when I went to school, 95 was pretty good. So I think that we can point to our whatever someone may perceive as what was a mistake, but I think what we really have to point out too is what we have achieved, and I think Southbury can still be proud of that.
Is there because I haven't been in some of those meetings, when they were looking at some of the non-categorized spaces like golf courses, cemeteries, etc., is there a desire amongst some members on the Board of Finance to include those in open space? Has that been discussed?
I am not at the meetings, but my guess is that there's a curiosity about them.
Because unless something by law is zoned that it may never be developed, it makes no sense.
A golf course can be
whatsoever.
developed.
A golf course can absolutely be developed, and there are certain places where the town should consider even those having the right and having the resources to be prepared to preserve and protect the quality of life of our town. And I do believe in, for the last 2 years certainly that we've done it. We've made recommendations to at least maintain some low level, at least, of continued investment in the open space fund. It would get cut, along. And I understand those, and these have been challenging times certainly from a state perspective. That said, I think to Justin's point, and I think we do all agree on this, we need to be in a financial position that should a piece of property, whether it be something that's currently considered open space or something that's not, but that might go on the market, that this town has a vested interest in potentially protecting to protect the residents, that we at least have the resources to take advantage of that opportunity to do our job.
Okay, I think this board was, quite frankly, all 6 of us in the last election were elected based on everybody's support of open space and space initiative, and I think that's part of what the people of South Bay are speaking. So, Ray, thank you for your piece. Appreciate your. That was a little bit of an undertaking. Ray did a lot of good work on that with the overlays. It's kind of interesting with the maps that I've seen, where it's actually not showing wetlands, and it's property I own that I know it's wetlands, and it's virtually impossible until they're flagged professionally to determine what those are either. So it's a goal, and I think we kind of have determined that it's still a goal that this board would support. Okay, public comments. This is the time we have our public comments. We have 3 minutes. Joe?
This will be topical. I'm Joe Ruggiero, 245 Skyview Drive, Southbury. I'm also Vice President of the Southbury Land Trust. I appreciate Ray Mather's efforts at data collection concerning open space, but I wanted to make a few comments about the results, because I think we have to be very careful about the changing certain definitions and resetting the goalposts during the middle of the game. To start with, the notion of perceived open space that was mentioned on the spreadsheet is just that, it's perceived. Unless open space is permanently preserved and protected from subsequent development, and with certain types of deed restrictions, it should not be considered open space. If we count certain parcels as open space in town and then the status of the property changes in the future and it's developed, then what do? You mentioned golf courses, that was my next example, so I'll skip over that. We also have to be a little cautious about counting unprotected parts of maybe the training school property. There's pieces that are protected and conserved, but there are other pieces that are not, so we have to be careful about that. I think one of the worst things we can do, in my opinion, is to designate a private land holding as open space based upon wetlands designation alone. I did some research and have not yet found any other community in Connecticut doing this automatically or officially. They count all, nobody counts them all as open space automatically. If the wetland space is conserved, then it is considered open space. If it's not conserved and just happens to be wet, then it does not count as open space, nor should it. I spoke with Tim Abbott, who is the director of the Litchfield Greenprint Collaborative. The Greenprint Collaborative is a regional collaborative of nearly 24 land trusts and conservation groups working together with 28 towns in the northwest corner, all of Litchfield. I asked him if the towns in the collaborative count unprotected private inland wetlands as open space. He told me that none of the towns do this. His opinion was that designating private unprotected wetlands as open space would likely open towns up to lawsuits, because the town would be perceived as preemptively taking the private land and forcing it to be designated as permanently open. So there's some issues there. He did mention, on the other hand, that they do count cemeteries as open space because there's certain deed restrictions that apply to them. Some are so popular, people are dying to get in. Sorry, anyway. Okay. I know, thanks for the rim shot, I appreciate it. So, in any case, a few more serious thoughts. I am troubled lately, not just because of percentages and open space designations. There seems to be an assault, mainly by certain members of the Board of Finance, on open space acquisition in general. Last year, they nulled out the funding in one open space account. I read recently that another member was trying to get the assessor to increase taxes on 490 land. Then I read in the May minutes of the strategic planning team about another wanting to change the plan of conservation and development because it doesn't like it. So I think that the plan of conservation and development for Southbury that was revised in 2012 sets realistic goals for the town and was done with a great deal of input from many people, not only folks with a finance background. The plan is not just about conservation, but concerns development as well. I, like many other people in the town, want balance and would be pleased to see more commercial development, especially in areas near the highway. I don't think anyone would object to a logical, residential commercial tax balance, along with continued preservation that enhances our great quality of life and that includes great open spaces that other towns downright envy. So I'm asking the Board of Selectmen to do whatever it can to stand by the current plan of conservation development. It sounds like you are. And the goals it sets forth, and to help maybe create a clear and legally sound definition of permanent open space. And finally, not to let certain closed minds end the effort in our community toward continued open space acquisition while encouraging logical commercial development where and when it makes sense. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thanks, Joe.
Any other public comment? Any other public comment? Any other public comment? And we'll close that part of the agenda. Announcements and correspondence. Any questions? Seeing none, we'll move on to the consent agenda. Any questions on the consent agenda?
Make a motion to approve.
Second?
Made and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And it carries. Minutes of June 15th, 2017, regular meeting. Have a motion?
Motion to approve.
I'll second.
Made and seconded. Any discussion on them? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And it carries. Unfinished business, Pierce Hollow. We're still working. I thought I would have an opinion from and information from our attorney today, but he was very tied up when we arrived with some other legal matter, someone bigger problem than me, so we'll get that to the next meeting. On the banner policy, Jason, do we have any?
I spoke to Tom Geip again, or I had some emails with him. I guess they're meeting next week. I've given them some suggested language changes, and they're going to talk about it and come with recommendations. Then we'll have to decide what we want to do with the ordinance. I will mention I was in Ridgefield today at Town Hall for a meeting, and they have a very large American flag, probably the biggest American flag I've ever seen, hanging from 2 trees in front of Town Hall in the same manner in which we hang our banners, so we're not alone in using trees for this type of activity.
Good. Okay.
So I have a question. What would be
It's pretty cool.
the cost implication of actually erecting steel structures to hold banners as opposed to relying on trees?
try and get some ideas on what that'll be.
I mean, I'd just be curious to know. I mean, the thing I worry about with trees is that you don't know what's going on inside of a tree branch. I mean, it could be ready to break. It could be there another 100 years. I mean, I've seen trees fall that I thought would be there for 100 years and they didn't. The other issue I have with it is wind load. I've been doing a little research on that, and it seems that those vents they cut in the banners don't really do much to reduce the wind load, not as much as people would like. And if you have a banner up there and there's a 70-mile-per-hour gust in a thunderstorm, which we get, you don't know, it's really hard to calculate what the load is going to be on the branch. So you got a combination of not knowing really what the true strength of the tree is, in combination with not really knowing what kind of force load you're going to put on it. And, you know, I'm a little uncomfortable with doing it on trees at this point. I would rather, if it was me, I'd put up some steel structures somewhere and use
The only thing
those.
we run into that would be, we'd have to talk with streetscape and planning. Obviously, would have to be something that would be acceptable to our streetscape plan. So we can kind of get some information on that too. And if that's a direction,
I'm leaning in that direction, and I just wanted to let everybody here know that those are my thoughts on it.
we just have to figure out how much it would cost, and if they make something that is aesthetically matching. So we can look into that. Okay. No new business, which is nice. Update, not a lot to update. We're just churning along, getting things done. It's kind of quiet here in the summertime. Raise was a big piece of information. We're working on the Teamster negotiations and whatnot. So other than that, there hasn't been many meetings. Are you whispering to this file? Updates. Oh, yes, I forgot that. I don't know if everybody's heard that Joanne Bolin has resigned or retired from the Registrar of Voters June 29th, and Danielle has been appointed as the Republican Registrar. Okay? Just so you know. Did you know that?
I just heard that.
Yeah, we heard it last night.
Okay. That's my report. Reports from liaisons?
Haven't had any meetings to report on.
Okay. Justin?
Energy Task Force has not met this year. IPOC has not met since our last meeting. Economic Development did meet. One of the things that came up is that they were planning to send John Guerin to the Committee on Town-Owned Property near I-84, but they were unaware of the restrictions that had been put on me in regards to serving on that committee, which obviously would apply to John as well. So I suggested that, John could certainly be a non-voting member, but it might make sense for somebody else from the board to come along as well. So I think they're going to send Ann Armino.
Okay.
And that's it.
That's it. Jason?
LEPC hasn't met. The library board did meet. Not much going on. The big thing was the report from the Friends on the book sale, where they made about $33,000 this year. They've increased their funding to programming at the library by 20%, and given their financial status, they're making like a one-time gift in $15,000 to $20,000 range to the library to do some improvement that'll be discussed at a later meeting. And that's pretty much it.
I'd encourage people to read the June Director's Report for Parks and Rec because it does get an update, but summer camp's open. All programs seem to be running smoothly and well. Pool's open. Knock on wood. Things seem great. I'm getting good reports from neighbors. Nothing of note on EMS, and Region 15 isn't meeting right now. I will note that one thing that you probably did read, that Superintendent Botsford will not be renewing her contract when it expires in 2 years. So at some point, probably in the next year, I'd say we'd be, the region will be on the hunt for her replacement.
Okay. Any other business? Entertain a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.
That's it? Seriously.
Yeah.
How you doing, Bill?
That's all right.
Haven't seen you at a couple meetings. I think you've been on vacation, or?
They let you take vacation?
Believe it or not, yeah. I don't let my people take vacation. It's strictly prohibited. After work. Wasn't the shortest meeting on record by any means.
That's a good official meeting.
Yeah.